God, it's so hot.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of One-on-One with Sam, brought to you by Fantasy Focused and the Original Hooters. I am very excited to have my good friend Mike Rothstein joining me today. I'm so excited to have you on with me. We've been friends for a couple years now.
It's only been a couple. Wait, it's only been a couple for real. It feels like so much longer than that, but maybe that's COVID's fault because every day feels like 5 years. So in COVID time, we've actually been friends for 3 decades, which maybe is, yeah.
That sounds pretty accurate, actually. No, I feel like we've been friends at least 5 years now.
It has to be that. I mean, it's been 2 years since I think I've seen you last. So
I know. It's been
minimum.
a bit.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
Barring COVID, we should fix that.
Yes. Well, barring COVID, it would have actually already been fixed because I would have been out in LA already.
I know. You were planning your annual LA trip.
It's not annual anymore, but blame COVID. Blame
Yes.
COVID for us not seeing each other.
I know.
Of course, you can always come to the Midwest too. That's never stopped you.
I know. Okay, so my brother lives in Indiana now. So there's a lot of reasons that I need to get my butt over there. So it will happen.
Just so you know, California girl, like the Midwest is like, it's a big swath of country. Indiana and Michigan, like I know, like not super close, but actually it is. I know where your brother is. It is drivable. So, as somebody who grew up in New York, I definitely did not have an appreciation of how large the Midwest was until I moved to the Midwest about, I guess, I don't know, probably close to 15 years ago now. Before that, I would have said the same thing. I've been like, sure. Midwest, yeah. I live in Nebraska and you live in Ohio. You do realize that's like 14 hours away, right? Sure.
Sure, it's totally drivable. Yeah, no big deal. I could do it in a weekend.
Yeah. But no, now I understand, geography.
Yeah, I did do a cross-country trip with my brother, so it gave me a bit more perspective of like how long it takes to go through certain states. So, I do have that. I'll fix it. I promise I'll fix it. I'll be a better friend. But I do have to open up with just I have to open up quick with the news that literally just dropped. This episode will air tomorrow, but just very quickly, Cam Newton is now a New England Patriot. I kind of felt like that was a landing spot for him. I'm not that surprised. Are you?
No, I'm not. I mean, listen, to me, I almost called him San Diego again, even though they've, that's like it's like a tick I have. But no, to me, the Chargers would have made a lot of sense. But Anthony Lynn really seemed very, very confident and very comfortable and still does with Tyrod Taylor. Mm-hmm. So, okay, who else needs a starting quarterback that will play him this year? And it's kind of a spot where it's like, okay, this makes sense to be a starter. Well, there is really one spot, and that's New England. And I think Cam Newton helps them win. I think Cam Newton, when he's healthy, is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL still. It's not like he's 37 years old and his arm is questionable. Like, frankly, Phillip Rivers, I think if you are a Colts fan, you should have a lot of questions about Phillip Rivers because I saw Phillip Rivers play last year. Phillip Rivers did not look like the same Phillip Rivers. No. You saw Peyton Manning toward the end of his career with Denver, and he was not the same Peyton Manning. So you look at Eli Manning at the end of his career, not the same Eli Manning. So I look at Cam Newton way different than that because I think Cam Newton's still very much in the prime of his career and has just been set back with injuries. And if he can be healthy, then, I mean, if I'm the Bills, if I'm the Jets, if I'm, I guess, the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins are probably a year away. I'm just kind of like, really? Are you kidding? Like, all right, like here you go again.
Yeah.
But I think the Patriots, if they get a healthy Cam Newton, they win the AFC East.
I mean, that's not a crazy take to me because I agree. I feel like they had one position kind of away, and they do still have an amazing defense. Obviously, they got as far as they did last year with the great defense that they had. Now, their offensive weapons, I feel like, are not as crazy deep as others. I mean, but that's the Patriots. They're used to just juggling a different guy every week and not having a single guy that's their main guy. I feel like this is an uptick for someone like Julian Edelman, who was dropping a lot in a lot of fantasy drafts that I was seeing him go in like the 4th, 5th round. And I'm like, did everyone forget Julian Edelman? Oh, wait, yeah, he doesn't have Tom Brady anymore. But now with Cam Newton, who hopefully will have a healthy arm and shoulder. And if he is, able to complete a pass, that's a great weapon for him.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I'm still not sold on the options Cam Newton will have other than at running back. I think at running back, they're still in a really good spot. You've seen what they've done in the past. They like going running back by committee. Sony Michel is a great, great player. So is James White. So running back, they're fine. And maybe with Cam Newton, frankly, if his arm isn't where it used to be in Carolina, you lean on that more. But yeah, I would say if there is a concern when I look at the Patriots roster beyond Cam Newton's health at this point, it is they didn't upgrade their receiving core. I'm still high on N'Keal Harry. I am, and maybe I'm, social distance table for one here, but I think N'Keal Harry is going to be a really good player. I think Jacoby Myers has a chance to be a really good player. I think their receivers were just really young last year, and Tom Brady had been so accustomed to having guys he trusted and not really playing with rookies. Because if you think about it, I mean, he had Danny Amendola for years, and obviously Edelman, and Gronkowski, and he didn't have Gronk, and he had Edelman, didn't have Amendola. So you look, although he didn't have Amendola for a couple of years now, so you look at that and you say, well, there's only one guy that Tom Brady has that comfort with. Well, now everybody's new to Cam Newton, so I think that could actually help this receiving core more because it's going to force Cam Newton to develop trust. Again, provided Cam Newton wins this job, to develop trust with some of those younger players and see what happens. If I were drafting in a fantasy draft today for a season that who knows what it'll look like, I would be pretty high on N'Keal Harry at the moment because I think he's going to be a very, very good player, and I think he'll get a bit more opportunities perhaps this coming season.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that the floor has just been raised for each of them now having Cam there at the helm, and you just have to hope again that he's healthy, wins the job. But I like what you said also about Belichick being able to work with personalities. And I know that he's had to deal with a lot of different personalities. And if someone's going to work well with a quarterback like Cam, Belichick's obviously the coach to do it. But I mean, pivoting a little bit from quarterbacks, I mean, we just talked about Cam and his injuries. I just want to pivot onto the Lions, which is what I really would love to dive into a bit more with you.
Super exciting team.
Super exciting. Well, I think it's going to be exciting this year. I mean, I feel like every year you have to hope for the best for everything. I mean, as a Steelers fan, we couldn't have been worse last year, so I got to hope for the better 2020. We all do.
Well, you should have Ben Roethlisberger at some sort of health this year, which obviously you didn't have last year, and that caused a lot of problems as far as the Steelers go. With the Lions, it's a very similar situation because, Chase Daniel is an upgrade from the David Blau, Jeff Driscoll, Josh Johnson, Connor Cook. I mean, they had at one point, I think, 14 quarterbacks on the roster, overall throughout the course of the year. Chase Daniel is an upgrade from that carousel because he's an established backup who's run many systems before, and he can get you out of a game, which is what you really want out of a backup. And for those that don't know and don't totally understand, really the main role of the backup is to get the starter ready for Sunday and to get to help with watching tape, to help with reading defenses. That's more of the main job of the backup than being, able to start 16 games if they needed to, because and if you look at the backups Matthew Stafford has had throughout his career, they've all either been veterans with a ton of experience early in his career, a guy like Sean Hill, a guy like they had Dan Orlovsky, Matt Castle, Kellen Moore, obviously now the potentially going to be a head coach here in a few years depending how things go in Dallas, was their third quarterback, incredibly bright. So you had that behind Matthew Stafford. I wrote about this 5-6 years ago now about what that role really is for the backup quarterback. And so I'm saying all this, right? But Matthew Stafford has to stay healthy because otherwise Chase Daniel's not going to win you a ton of games. He can get you out of a couple games. He can maybe get you through 3 weeks if you need it. But if you have to rely on Chase Daniel long term, if you're the Lions, you're in trouble. It still all flows through Matthew Stafford, who is playing at an MVP type level on a mediocre team before, the back broke.
Yeah. I mean, back injuries, I think, throughout just the NFL, and anytime you see a player that gets one, you immediately are just hesitant as far as like how their career is going to shape out after, because the back obviously is, it's your back. Like, this is the main part that holds you together. So anytime you break that, and it can shake a player. So I saw you post, and the article that you just wrote about, he's healthy. His wife has posted videos of him doing workouts, and, the team is posting these videos as well. So he looks good. He's running. He doesn't look like he's holding back. That's exciting in that way. I mean, at least you see him getting that movement now.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Matthew Stafford said back in late December that he felt he was getting close. Mm-hmm. And then you heard Matthew Stafford say in April he was fine. You heard Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia at the Combine say he would be good. You said, you heard everything pre-COVID, mm-hmm. people saying, yeah, he'd be good to go for spring workouts if they start when they're supposed to start. So there was never a question. Like, there were too many people saying he was healthy that, mm-hmm. to me, I was not questioning that. Matthew Stafford, this was back in December, I almost said September, but December, said, yeah, he felt it was a freak thing, mm-hmm. and that once he's healthy, he should be good. We'll see what happens there. I'm always skeptical when it comes to backs, how that goes, and similarly with knees and elbows, frankly.
Sure.
You never truly know, and obviously depending on the sport. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that. But yeah, Matthew Stafford looked good, obviously violating the NFLPA's wishes, along with Tom Brady and Russell Wilson, of, hey, don't practice with your teammates, please, until training camp, because we'd like to try and keep COVID from running rampant if we can. And Matthew Stafford with his pregnant wife, who they just had a child actually over the weekend, child number 4.
Oh, wow. Congrats to them.
Kelly Stafford. But, they were out there. Kelly Stafford was out there with 2 or 3 players, and Stafford's really been doing group workouts here and there. In Atlanta, he worked out with some guys, went out to California, and then obviously now he's back in Detroit, and they did some workouts here. Mm-hmm. He's working out, but at the same time, it's a tough situation for players, I think, because
sure.
you need and this is where I think it gets really interesting for the NFL in general this season is, it's not like, even like in basketball, yeah, you could use group workouts, all that, but you can still work on things on your own. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're a wide receiver, you can only get so much work on the jugs machine if you have one.
Yeah.
If you're a quarterback, you can only get so much work throwing to assorted family members or to
open net in the backyard
or whatever. If you're a defensive lineman, you can only do so much. Offensive lineman, you can only do so much. You need to have other people mm-hmm. to do those sorts of things. If you're a running back, you can only run on air and through cones and up over hurdles and under things so much. So you need that. And the thing with the NFL, I think, versus other sports, although I think it realistically probably happened in every sport during the first stage of the pandemic when sports were gone, is, yeah, guys tried the best to work out with each other. But with the NFL, you also know in the NFL, if you're not doing it, other people are. And Tom Brady, and some of them, like Tom Brady specifically, are flaunting it very, 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 very heavily. So that's, what do you do at that point? Like, if you're, I mean, I don't know. If you're Deshaun Watson, what do you do? I mean, you can you practice? Maybe the thing is, and this, maybe if you're a quarterback or playing, maybe you just don't post it on social media, though.
Yeah, maybe we just kind of keep it on the DL a little bit.
Let's be real. If Kelly Stafford doesn't post that on social media, and if a couple of other people don't post it on social media, no one knows that Matthew Stafford, Nick Bott, and Jamal Agnew, and a couple of other people were working out. No one knows, and there's no stories written. There's no questions. They're saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" With do I think Matthew Stafford takes a lot of precautions? I do. Especially with having she's not pregnant anymore, but for a large portion of the COVID crisis, a very, very pregnant wife. But if you follow Kelly Stafford on Instagram, you also saw she was going and getting workouts in with her trainer. So it's not like she was just, sitting around. Like, she was putting herself at varying levels of risk as well.
Sure.
So I don't know, and I don't know the answer. Sorry, by the way, if my screen keeps going a little bit dark and light, I apologize. But let me actually flip on a second light here. But I just don't know. I don't think anyone really knows.
No, for sure. And I think that that's this whole year. And honestly, with the way that this COVID and the quarantine has all worked out, we're all in this sense of unease, and that we're trying to adapt, and players are trying to adapt. I mean, you're trying to find ways to find news. I mean, I'm trying to find ways to still talk about fantasy football like we're going to even have a season, and trying to stay positive and excited when there's some days when I'm like, I go to the store, nobody's wearing a mask. I'm in California. Our numbers keep going up, and I'm just looking around like, guys, if you just wear a mask, we'll get our sports back. And then, you hear the NBA say, okay, we're a go. We're going to have our playoffs. We're getting in the bubble. By the way, we had 19 players test positive. No big deal. We're just going to move forward. So it's like, okay, we're going to.
And by the way, you're doing it in Florida. Which right now is like moving backward on things. So I've been along. I've said this publicly, I think, before. I am a believer that the NFL season will start in some form or fashion. I'll be very curious to see if it ends, if they get a full season in. And I think, listen, there are a lot of questions. There are a ton of questions that need to be answered and that haven't been answered yet. And I don't get the sense that teams know, because I don't know if there's been a directive from the league standpoint of what happens. What happens if 14 players on a team get COVID and are out for 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. What happened or what happens if an entire offensive line is wiped out by COVID? And if you do contact tracing, if your center gets COVID, your quarterback's probably out based off of contact tracing, unless you run purely out of shotgun. But even then, same football, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And you can't sanitize between, snap and touching the ball. So, and if a quarterback every quarterback going to wear gloves? Mm-hmm. Probably not. No. One would think, because that could hurt some player. Maybe not. We don't know. And what happens, say, in that worst case scenario where 14, 15 players get COVID during the season? Well, okay, if those are starters, well, are you going to have a separate like COVID taxi squad where you can then call up 15 other players? It's not even like you can do back end of the roster churn, because those are your players you're going to need to play. You're also going to have to if you're bringing in players off the street, you're going to have to test them. Yeah. And who knows how that's going to go. So you're going to carry a larger practice squad. I saw something about like 16, but okay, fine. Are all those 16 players on the practice squad? And who knows if that's actually true or not, or going to happen. But whatever it is, are all of those players going to be third year or younger? Or because you might need more players, as a player who's maybe a roster bubble vet, like on the Lions, Jamal Agnew, to me right now, a roster bubble guy. I don't believe he has practice squad eligibility. But say he ends up on the wrong side of your roster, like, can you now put him on your practice squad and have kind of a free passage thing? Because that's the thing too, is all of a sudden you're moving guys up back and forth. It's like, well, guys are going to be on waivers. So what happens if another team gets hit with that? And then they pull 4 of your guys. Like, at some point there needs to be some sort of agreement or some sort of rules or stipulations for all of this that I haven't seen set, because I think right now they're just worried about getting the training camp, and you kind of deal with what you deal with when you deal with it. And there's also the question, I mean, you're seeing players in the NBA opt out. You're seeing players in Major League Baseball opt out. You're seeing WNBA players opt out. It would not shock me at all if NFL players at some point, some of them, opt out. I know I've talked to some players who are not like super thrilled about the situation because they don't want COVID at all. No. Like they've seen what it does. And, I mean, you're putting, and because the NFL doesn't have guaranteed contracts, right? You're putting players in a tough position, Sam, because like, okay, say you're a player back end of the roster receiver. Let's just say that you've got a shot of making the roster, maybe not. And we all know how quickly things can turn in the league. Absolutely. What do you do if this is your career, but also say you have grandparents who are immunocompromised who happen to, be the people that raised you or that you're very close with and see all the time, or or your parents are elderly, or your parents are sick, or your brother or your sister. I mean, or one of your kids, because listen, we've seen NFL players who have had children who've dealt with cancer in the last few years, and we all know kind of some of the stuff there. And what about your older coaches in the league and your GMs and your owners as well? Like, it's not like owners are sitting there like in perfect. I mean, Martha Ford obviously just stepped down this week to give the franchise controlling to her daughter Sheila, but Martha Ford's 94 years old. She had not missed a game in her 6.5 years of being an owner. Like, how would that have worked? I mean, and Sheila's 68 herself, and that's just with the Lions. But you look all across the league, and it's not like, owners are in their 20s or 30s like players are. There are just so many questions to me of how all of this is going to. So maybe owners don't travel, and maybe that's an answer. But you're also, asking billionaires to make that type of decision. And I don't know. I just don't know the answers to any of these questions when it comes to COVID. And I don't think anyone does right now. Anyone who says they know exactly what's going to happen doesn't really know.
No, I don't think they do. Also,
sorry, I get heated on that, and I just kind of go.
No, you're good. I'm getting a little bit of feedback on your mic. I don't know. I'm not quite sure why, but that's okay. I'll move forward. I love that you bring up to the staff though and the assistant coaches, because comparing an NBA team to an NFL team, obviously you have a huge roster size difference. You have a huge coaching staff difference. So not only do you have, like you said, do you bring on that extra taxi squad of players? But okay, you've got maybe immune compromised older coaches that you worry about them traveling. You're not going to necessarily be busing to every single game. You're still going to be flying. So that's another risk. They have to get tested as soon as they land, and then tested again, and then tested probably the day before as well. So at any point in the week of a travel week, you can imagine certain players popping up COVID positive and then another couple players testing positive. You wonder if you get a certain number of players that test positive, do you then postpone the game? Do you reschedule the game? At what point are we going to have enough rescheduled games that they can't keep up with all of these rescheduled games,
I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of that. I mean, I cover also boxing and a little bit of MMA, UFC, and obviously both of those sports have been back for a while, are in Vegas and have their own separate bubbles. And I mean, you talk to people with the Top Rank bubble. I wrote about it the first week back, and granted, they've made some improvements and they've made some changes to their testing protocol. But you look at it, I mean, you had people who were in that bubble for 23 straight days, and for fighters and for their fight teams, you don't have to be in the bubble that long. You show up if you fought on Tuesday, you'd show up on Saturday or Sunday. You'd go through that. You'd go through the weigh-in. Everybody good, great. You fight Tuesday, you're gone. Well, You can't do that in the NFL. You need to do an NBA type bubble, but how can you do that? You're going to do that in 32 cities? Are you going to tell, we'll use Matthew Stafford again, just had a child as an example. Hey, Matthew Stafford, you know what? You're not going to be around for the first 5 months or so of your daughter's, or I don't know whether they had a daughter or a son, but of your child's life. And you're also going to leave Kelly. Sure, they have some help, but you're going to leave them with 3 other kids under 5. Like you're asking other players if, so say it's not a full 7-day-a-week bubble, right? So say maybe it's a 5-day-a-week bubble. You go in Tuesday night, you leave Sunday night after the game, or you go in whatever it is, and you basically Monday practices and Monday meetings don't happen, or they happen virtually. Let's just say that. Again, all speculation. No one's just throwing this out there. Well, are players going to be comfortable with that 5-day bubble? Because, I mean, a lot of players, that Friday night into Saturday morning is the time when they get to spend the most time with their family if they're not traveling. So, maybe younger players won't care as much, but older guys very much might. Like guys who have kids who are in school who, you might not, like Matt Prater is a good example. I don't know where Matt Prater stands on this. I haven't talked to him about it, but he's got 3 kids and a couple of them are in school. So you're all right. So you're going to leave his wife, Katie, like she's got to handle 3 kids for 5 months. All right. I mean, and some of that too on coaches, like coach. It'll be very curious to see how coaches feel about that, because coaches and GMs and they just spent the most time they've ever spent with their families.
Yeah.
And now, are they going to feel comfortable going into a complete bubble and not really seeing them? Because the kids aren't going to go into a bubble, and it's. I don't know. I don't know any of the answers to any of these questions. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how it works. I'm just as curious as everybody else to see it. But you think and you run scenarios through your head of just how can this work? What can they do? And you kind of go from there, because I think that, to me, I look at what science and doctors say.
Yeah.
And that's what I go with. And this is somebody who literally, I was on an airplane. We're recording this Sunday night. I was on an airplane, Sam, 3 hours ago, as you know.
Yeah.
Like, that was the first, I flew down to my brother on Thursday, and I flew back on tonight. And it's the first time, and I fly all the time. I fly abroad, I fly whatever, for work, for fun, and I will wholly admit I was very much not feeling super comfortable flying. I did it, and I did it as much as a test run as anything else. I felt more comfortable on the first flight than the second flight, because all of a sudden I saw somebody on my flight who didn't have their mask all the way up. And I actually went to the flight attendant and said, hey, I couldn't even say it because I couldn't speak it. I actually typed on my phone, and I apologized, and I said, hey, can you ask that person to pull up their mask, because it's not my place to, and they did, and a couple other people saw what I did, and they nodded. But it's like, this is just general public here, and who knows anything, we just don't know so much of, you're relying on a lot. This was really the first time I've been out of Michigan since March. And it was interesting to see in North Carolina how they treated it versus how they treat it in Michigan, where Michigan, we got hit really hard, much like California did early on. And people have been taken as largely seriously, but other states haven't. And it's been really intriguing and interesting to see that. And how do you police that? Look at Arizona, you look at Florida right now, right? Like,
seriously.
Well, okay, how's that going to, if I'm a player on, I don't know if the Steelers or Dolphins play this year or whatever, but if I'm a player on the Steelers and I'm flying down to Miami to play the Dolphins, do I feel great about that?
Probably not.
Right. You just don't know the answer. And it's going to change, because, a month ago, Michigan was in a really bad way, and North Carolina wasn't really doing that, was fine kind of. And now North Carolina has been surging. Michigan's doing all right. You see the maps change every week. We don't know, and you hear people say, I'm sorry if I'm just going on and on about this, but you hear people say, right, that oh, well, you don't want, they criticize sports writers who bring up these things. Oh, you don't want sports. No, literally, sports is my job. It is my profession. It is what pays my bills.
Yes.
So I can, do things in life like that. That is my chosen profession.
Yes.
Of course I want this back, but yeah, you have to think about health of humans first, and both the humans who are playing football, the humans who are covering football, and the humans just in society as well. And how is that going to go? I don't know. I'm saying a lot of word vomit here, because none of us really know.
Yeah, no, exactly. But like you just said, none of us really know, but we are all speculating. And I think maybe the thing about football that is maybe just causing us to all go into a bit of a flurry as far as asking questions, because we've seen and heard other sports come up with plans or spitball plans, and you're hearing this news of NHL's trying to figure out, okay, do they have a bubble that's in Canada? Because they have a lot of teams up there, and a lot of that would be an easy bubble for them to do. We've obviously heard a lot of the way that they've developed the NBA bubble as they were going through the process, that they were very vocal about how they were doing that. And I think the issue is that the NFL is not being vocal at all with any sort of plan. So as the days tick away and we get closer, we're like, we want a plan and we want to know what it is.
Well, I think part of it too is the NFL still has the benefit of some time.
Yeah, they do.
As long as they're doing some sort of plan, which I'm sure, I'd be shocked if they weren't.
Yeah.
So from talking to the top ranked people, right, we'll go back to boxing, because I can speak pretty candidly on this, because I wrote about them, what it took to get boxing back to Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who run Top Rank Boxing, Todd DeBuff, Brad Jacobs, they were working on this for months. You didn't hear much about it. You heard, things pop up here and there, but you didn't, and I happen to be privy to multiple iterations of their plan as it went. But I mean, Brad Jacobs started formulating stuff in April for them to have a protocol in June that's still been amended, as we're hitting toward the end of June here. So I'm not concerned that we haven't heard a plan yet. I just think for the NFL, there is so much, which has been my point kind of all along. There is so much that's going to be involved. And we've heard, some bits and pieces of their plan. We've heard of the different tiers that they're going to have and who's going to maybe be in some of those tiers. And that will be really interesting too. I mean, because the question too, if you're an NFL team, do you really need your business side in the office? Probably not. So do they have to come in? Maybe, or can you Zoom meetings and can you Skype me? Like, I mean, as a media member, I have no expectations of being in the facility anytime soon. Sure. I mean, we've been doing Zoom stuff and phone call stuff for months now, and so I'm not. I get people's impatience with it, and I wouldn't say I'm impatient. Now, if we're sitting here, what is it? It's June 28th. So this is going to run on June 29th. If we're sitting here July 15th and we don't have an idea of really what training camp plan is, then sure, I think you have a concern because teams have to come back in 2 weeks. Guys, theoretically, rookies might be able to, and quarterbacks might come back sooner than that, unless everybody's just coming in at once. Like, I still think there's time for them to kind of see where things go. I don't think they can wait as long as, watching the NHL and Major League Baseball and the NBA. Hi, Knox, coming back. That was Knox, right?
Yes. Okay. I know he's meowing quite a lot because this is the second podcast I've done today, and he's like, "Can you get out of the closet and play with me, Mom?" I'm like, "No."
I mean, so to me, I think they won't have the benefit of truly seeing what it looks like when it comes back, but they will have the benefit of seeing, I think, all of the protocols and then being able to kind of adjust on the fly. That's the one thing I've learned from covering like Top Rank coming back and watching the UFC and even watching golf and come back is you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to work on the fly and you have to be comfortable with that. And the NFL has to understand that what you set out to do July 15th may no longer work as well August 15th.
Yeah.
And can you adjust and handle that? I mean, and how much leverage you give individual teams to do certain things versus every team has to do it the same way. And, I mean, you're going to see the same thing in college football too, right? Like between conferences, between teams. Yeah. College football to me is a whole other deal because if you have like, we'll use Michigan. So I live in Michigan, right? We'll use Michigan and Michigan State as an example. You have guys coming back to class. And by the way, this all matters for the NFL too, because if there's no college football season, that changes the scouting process. It changes certain potential draft things as well, looking way down the road. But
sure,
how can you can't prevent, the McCaffrey, the potential quarterback from Michigan. I think he's still in Michigan. I haven't watched a ton of college football, but you can't prevent him from going to class. He literally has to do that and interact with other students. So, and you're also talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. Can you really trust them to not go out and not see their friends? I mean, like I trust that NFL players can be disciplined enough to say, okay, I'm seeing these people in my workday. I will see my family. Maybe I have to be isolated a little bit from my kids if they're in school. You figure it out. I trust that more than in college for sure. So this is the COVID podcast, by the way, with Sarah.
I
This is what
know.
this turned into is the corona. But this is the crazy thing is that this happened. I mean, so I saw my brother and my dad, and they were asking me questions about this. And one of my brother's friends came over, and they've been like social distancing together. And they were asking questions about this, and this is just what people want to know. And I'm like, I don't have an answer for you. If I did, I'd break it.
Right? You'd be the breaking news for us. But no, I mean, honestly, it's a concern that we all have, and we're all dealing with it in different ways. Like for myself, they started rolling in a couple of us to the office because we'd been working from home. So we got to 2 weeks before we got sent home because someone tested positive for COVID. So we had to clear out the office, and so now we're back at home. But it's going to be like that, where we're just figuring this out as we go. And I think it's just going to be, hopefully we get football. You got to stay positive. Hopefully we do get it. But at the same time, you just ultimately hope that whatever they do, they figure out a way to make everyone safe. And just like you said, the family is safe. And then obviously coaching staff, anyone older that's involved, hopefully they can stay safe as well. This is just, hopefully the NFL can learn from the mistakes and the different trials that other sports are going through as they build up to a season. And then we can get some sort of clarity and learn from there. But
I'd say the other thing too, and I really hope fans are respectful with this, which who knows, right? But if a player chooses to opt out, like you're seeing with Trevor Ariza in the NBA, like you're seeing with Avery Bradley in the NBA, like you're seeing with Chrissy Tolliver in the WNBA, I hope that fans don't get on them for opting out and be like, you're letting down your team, because every decision for every player, every coach, heck, every media member, every staffer is going to be very personal and very much based on their own family situations. And like, I will not, for one, be critical of a player. Like if Matthew Stafford came out tomorrow and said, you know what, listen, we just had a kid. I can't do that. Like, can't play this season. I don't think that's going to happen. But say he did that. Can't be critical of it. You can't, because family decisions trump all when it comes to this.
Absolutely.
Like, it's if you're being critical of a player for making a decision of that, like really look inside yourself and say, well, like, what decisions am I making? And like, so that's just how I look at it. Like, I'm not going to be critical of a player or a coach or anyone that says, hey, sorry, I don't feel comfortable doing this, because at the end, I read somewhere, I don't remember where, but we've talked about a little bit too, that the athletes are very healthy, their bodies are in very good shape, they're not maybe in as high of risk, but say an athlete gets really sick and has some lung damage. Well, I'm sorry, for an elite athlete, your career might be over.
Absolutely. I mean, there's also some interesting symptoms that people are still experiencing, ones that I didn't even know were a thing, but that some people experience losing their sense of taste or their sense of smell for extended period of time. I just saw an alert earlier saying someone had it and for months later still cannot smell. They do not have that sense of smell. So there's going to be repercussions from this, from the players that do get it. And like you just brought up brilliantly, I mean, with it affecting the lungs the way that it is, again, these are high performance athletes. If someone gets affected by it and it does cause lung damage, great. That means that player's career has just been shortened, and they're going to look back and think, should I have sat out this season hoping for an even healthier year next year? Especially players that are on that bubble where they could be holding out for a contract. Maybe they hold out because, one, they want to hold out for a better contract, but two, they don't want to risk hurting themselves for a better contract next year to extend their career. I mean, football is such a...
NFL is very finite in their careers. They're just here's the thing, Sam, and this is just the truth with everything with COVID. We don't freaking know. Like, we just don't.
We just don't know.
I mean, if you had told me, I remember I was sitting there for my podcast in March. I was interviewing Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I would interview guys live at a bar in Ann Arbor that I don't think, unless they reopened while I was gone, they still haven't reopened. And we were sitting there. This was the Wednesday night. So whatever that was, the 12th, 13th, whatever it was, the day that Rudy Gobert, like they pulled Rudy Gobert and they pulled
I think that was a Tuesday night.
Yeah, the Jazz and the Thunder off the court. No, it was
Was it a Wednesday?
I think it was a Wednesday. I think it might have been a Tuesday. Whatever that night was. We did the interview, and I remember like I was like at the like, no, I'm just elbow bumping you, like no handshake, no fist bump, and that's just nope. And that like I was getting a little bit of stuff, and then I went to dinner with one of the Donovan Peoples-Jones's reps, and as we're sitting at dinner, Tom Hanks announces he has COVID, and the NBA shuts down.
Yeah, it was literally like someone grabbed a switch. Boom.
Right. And it was like, okay, so what does this mean? And at that point, by the way, I was still assigned to cover the NCAA tournament in Spokane, Washington, because that had not been shut down yet. Mm-hmm. And you didn't know. And I, at that point, like looking at it now, I'm like, what was I thinking? But like, I was very much like, yeah, I'll go, whatever, because you thought it was going to be a week, 2 week thing. You didn't really know. And now I talked to some people I knew in Italy because Chris Durham, the former Lions receiver, was kind of helping coach football in Italy. And he and I had talked. He had actually been on my podcast, the Michael Rothstein Show, like about a week or two, maybe three earlier, when COVID was really starting to take hold in Italy. And he was up in Milan, and we talked about that a little bit and what that was like. And it was amazing to me because I listened, I talked to him a bunch since, and I listened back to the beginning of that podcast as COVID hit here. And the way I was talking was the same way he was talking 3 weeks earlier. And then you saw what happened in Italy. And then you saw what happened here. And you're just like, wow, that was like the parallels were right there. And you just didn't see it. So, I don't know. I don't know, Sam. I hope there's football this year. I do. I hope there's sports. In general, I hope every sport's able to come back, and I hope that but moreover, for me, I hope everybody stays healthy. And that's your family, that's your friends, that's my family, that's my friends, that's everybody's family and everybody's friends. Stay healthy, be safe, wear a mask. Like my mask is not anywhere near me, otherwise I would have put it on. But like, I mean, seriously, wear a mask, and I go out and I'm on the plane, I'm wearing a mask, I'm wearing gloves, like. That's just kind of what you have to do these days.
Yeah. I mean, it's become the new normal. And I mean, I was just talking to my roommate about how when it first was happening and I was being very, oh my gosh, I need to go to the store. I need to buy everything. And then she's like, I'm not worried. Why are you worried? I'm only going to worry when they close the restaurants. And like the next day they closed everything. And it was like,
yeah. Oh, I remember the day after. So the day after I was telling you about with that, like I probably bought, because I was like, all right, I'm not going to leave my house for a month. So I bought a whole bunch of food and Lara bars and all this stuff. Like, okay, because I live by myself. So if I got sick, well, what do I don't have any family around here, friends or anybody, no family. What do you do? Like, what does somebody who lives on their own do? So I'm like, all right, let me stock up. See what happens. Worst case, I have extra food that I can work my way through, and I don't have to go food shopping. You just, I wasn't hoarding, for sure. I mean, it took me like 2 weeks to find disinfectant wipes. I remember I was in a Walgreens, and I looked down, and there were literally 2 canisters of disinfectant wipes, and honestly, if you had told me that I had just been given $1 million, because you couldn't find them anywhere, and I found them, and I was like, oh my god, and I rationed them and cleaned, and I had rubbing alcohol that I made my own wipes if I need to, but that's just what you did and what you still do. To an extent, although you see them more out and about now when you're shopping, things seem to at least be stocked up a little bit more. I actually went food shopping on my way home from the airport, and there are still signs, however, in the local Kroger of hey, we're still kind of out of stuff, and Whole Foods was rationing, you can only buy X amount of X. Which, living by myself, I don't come near that anyway, because I just don't need it.
No, for sure. But I mean, we're all still having to deal with this new normal. I mean, I mean, I still am trying to work through all the food that I panic purchased when it all first closed down. So, I mean, I'm okay. The only thing is like, you know, you kind of you're used to it, and then you kind of become this new worried of going out, and you're like, I don't want to go out. I'm scared of everyone. I don't want people talking to me that don't have a mask on their face. Like, you almost get, it's going to be the opposite. So
I'm in and out when I food shop. Like, I have a process because I'm a ridiculous food shopper, but I am in, I am out. I have like I have my routine because I eat pretty cleanly, for the most part. So like, I know exactly what I'm going. I have celiac, so like I know what I'm buying in each store, and I'm like, boom, 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 go, okay,
knock
boom.
it out, get it done.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not talking to anybody. I say thank you to the people, you know, as I come in and I go, and that's it. And like, there's a couple of longtime grocery store employees that I know at places that I've gone now for about 10 years. So like, occasionally if I see them, I will stop and have a quick chat with them, because again, living by myself, the only in-person contact I had for 2 months with people were people who worked at the grocery store and at Walgreens. You know, I would go out once a week. Like, that was it. Like, that was because my friends were like, we're not gonna see each other. Like, you know, I think like we all expanded our bubble a little bit in like mid-May for like a little, and it was like socially distanced on the porch, wearing masks, but like, still, yeah, I mean, you know, and then you start timing walks and whatever, but like, yeah, I mean, I didn't see for literally from the middle of March, probably like March 13th until May 1st, maybe May 5th. The only people that I saw and had any conversations with in person were through a mask grocery store employees that I knew.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm going self-checkout as well. Yeah. Like, if I saw them working in the store, we would stop and have a few minute conversation, and that was it, like at an appropriate social distance. You know, like and I'm guilty of this, I admit this too. This gets into my idiosyncrasies way too much, but like, so every aisle is one way, right?
Yeah.
It drives me nuts when someone, and I admit I am sometimes guilty of it. If there's one thing I need in the aisle, especially at one store, I'm like, I know where it is at the end of the aisle, so I slip in and slip out. But you see people just like willy-nilly not paying attention to the one-way aisle.
I know.
I'm just all right, like, I mean, it's just a small thing, but I'm just like, there are big signs.
There's big signs that say the directional arrow. All that. I mean,
everyone's now seeing kind of my like anal retentiveness a little bit.
That's okay.
I don't really share this side on my podcast.
I feel like COVID is bringing it out in all of us, so don't feel bad. But I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing on social is all the Karens coming out that are getting videoed going into a store without a mask and then throwing fits because someone asked them to wear a mask, and then they're just like, this is my right, I can do what I want. So that, if anything, to me is the funniest thing coming out of all of this, is us seeing that side of people where it's like, you are literally, this is not a big deal. This is a 15-minute inconvenience. But
just wear a mask. Wear a mask. Just wear a mask. That's the only thing I said.
And then we won't videotape you and make it go viral on YouTube because you're being a Karen and being ridiculous.
Right. See, I know, honestly, and maybe this is privilege talking. I don't know. I would try not to do that personally, like, because you don't know what type of day someone is having.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, I know I've had bad days, and it's like, if someone videotaped that, like, that would not necessarily be great. You know, you just don't know.
Yeah.
When it comes to the mask stuff, other things, different conversation. But when it comes to the mask, like, I'm just like, I'm not gonna, like, everybody's got their own stuff, you know, like, just,
yeah.
Yeah, that's just kind of how I'm like, I'm gonna mind my own business. I don't want to interact with you anyway. So. But I want to interact with you, Sam, but I don't want to interact with, like, you know, general public. And just like, get me in, get me out, get me back to my apartment. Like, let me go see, you know, my friends so we can socially distance, hang out on lawns and whatever. And that is the extent, you know, and occasionally maybe let me play some really bad golf. And that is the extent of my life these days.
Jeez, yeah, I know. My brother's actually been golfing a lot now too with COVID, which I think is going to become the new hobby for everyone. But
I played really terribly in North Carolina. It was really, really bad.
Oh my gosh, no. But let me circle back onto football just with our last question.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've kind of turned this into a not football podcast, but sure.
That's okay. COVID's at the top of everyone's minds anyways. But let's bring this back and just talk a little bit. I want to talk specifically about running backs, just because the Lions did just get DeAndre Swift.
Yes.
Who, exciting young rookie. I mean, but they also have Kerryon Johnson, who didn't play his full 16 games with the knee injury that he had. And I feel like with the Lions, every year, we're all hoping that they utilize the running back position a little bit more, but we're a little bit scratching our heads at the end of the season, maybe. So I'm hoping that, based on the fact that Matt Patricia comes from New England and he's supposed to be doing this running back by committee, and we should be getting a bit more rushing yards. Hopefully we see a bit more out of Kerryon Johnson this year, healthy. And then hopefully we can see how he can work with DeAndre Swift. Do you feel like it's going to be immediate running back by committee, or we're immediately going to see just Kerryon first time?
Oh, it's going to be running back by committee. I mean, they've come out and said that already. And generally I take what people say with grains of salt, but we've also seen that in Matt Patricia's first 2 years. Remember, when Kerryon Johnson was a rookie, one of the big storylines that first month of the season was, why are you not giving Kerryon Johnson the ball? He broke your 100-yard rushing drought that lasted 4 seasons.
Yep.
What are you doing? Why aren't you giving him the ball more? And I mean, Matt Patricia's philosophy was, I don't want to burn out my running backs and then not have them in December and January. Now, of course, the counter argument to that is, well, if you're not winning games before that, you can have all of your running backs healthy and fresh all you want, but it won't, matter.
Yeah.
So, there's a delicate balance there. I think this is their deepest running back room since Matt Patricia has been there. At this point, I don't think you can count on Kerryon Johnson to play 16 games in a season, because he hasn't yet. And that's, I think Kerryon Johnson, when he's healthy, is a very good running back. I think if he can play 16 games, I think he's 1,000-yard back. Even whether DeAndre Swift is there or not, tell Knox to stop knocking stuff over.
He does that.
But no, I think Kerryon Johnson's 1,000-yard back if he's healthy. Now, what I think you'll see this year is a true committee-style situation. 2 guys I think you can absolutely pull in there are Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. I don't know what their carries will look like. We haven't seen DeAndre Swift carry the ball yet with the Lions. Usually you get a better idea through spring from talking to people or from, just being around. And, I can't really do any of that. Personally, I think Bo Scarborough has a role as kind of a short yardage, maybe goal line guy. If you're looking for maybe a goal line thief, he could be that. And then, what do they do with Ty Johnson? I think Ty Johnson still has a really good size speed component, but he doesn't have a job locked down because they drafted Jason Huntley in, I think it was the 5th round, and it's 5th or 6th round. It's a day 3 pick. And he's going to compete with Jamal Agnew, DB turned wide receiver Jamal Agnew, for the returner job. And I think that's really where he's going to maybe make his mark as a rookie. But he is very similar to J.D. McKissick in role. And the Lions, for a large portion of last season, found a role for J.D. McKissick in the offense that eventually got phased out, I think, as they wanted to give more work to Ty Johnson. But I look at that and I say, look at that. I just named, 5 running backs right there. I think all 5 of them have a shot to be on the roster and have a role. They may be different roles. I mean, I think you're going to see the majority of the carries go to a share between Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. But, I mean, it could be a hot hand situation too, because it's not like Bo Scarborough is slow. Like, no. Say a team runs, they really put only 7 in the box, and, they have a bigger nose tackle, and Frank Ragnow's winning battles. Well, okay, what do you maybe need in there if maybe the more elusive back isn't working? Well, Bo Scarborough will get you yards. That. Like, he will get you yards. He might not be able to break one for 80, but he will get you 4 yards. And maybe that's the type of back. Like, if they're winning games late, does that mean Bo Scarborough gets more work because maybe he's their 4-minute offense back?
Sure.
And that's his role. I don't know. I don't think they know yet. what
Sure.
that looks like. So as far as drafting Lions running backs go,
Do you just feel like it's a bit dart throwy after Kerryon Johnson then, just based on
I
one,
think you
Swift
can
not
throw
having?
Kerryon Johnson right in with those darts. I mean,
Yeah.
because I think there's a non-zero chance that DeAndre Swift ends up especially when you're talking about health. Like, I mean, right now, here's the thing: if you told me that DeAndre Swift were to get 12 carries a game, Kerryon Johnson were to get 10 carries a game, Bo Scarborough were to get 6 carries a game, and everyone else kind of gets like 5 somewhere in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would be a not surprising running back carry breakdown for me. And that could flip by the week, by the matchup, because that's what one of Matt Patricia's things defensively and offensively is he likes to be able to play by the matchup. So when you're looking at running backs too, like that's even the conundrum now if you're drafting now before training camp, like which, sure, I guess, is, well, what will the pass catching situation look like out of the backfield? Because that's where you could get a lot of value. DeAndre Swift can do that. Kerryon Johnson has shown he can do that. Jason Huntley, like, he can really do that. And Ty Johnson got a lot better at it as the season went on. So who ends up being that third down back? That might end if Swift or Kerryon end up winning that role along with splitting carries. That's the guy you want on the Lions. But that might change by the week too. So yeah, I think it's complete dart throws. I think if you're going to own one of Kerryon Johnson or DeAndre Swift, you really should try and get the other one, because the other thing in this is, as good as Matthew Stafford is and Kenny Golladay is and Marvin Jones is and TJ Hawkinson may be, and Danny Amendola could be still. I mean, who knows, when the bottom falls out on players once they hit their mid-30s. Matt Patricia wants to run the ball. He wants to do that a lot. And if you have both those guys on your roster, maybe you can start them as depending how many running backs you start, maybe you can start them as an RB2 in a flex.
Sure.
Maybe you can start both Kerryon and Kerryon and DeAndre Swift. But that's the thing. If you draft Kerryon Johnson, you almost have to make sure you have some sort of, if you want to handcuff due to injury, some sort of on your bench, DeAndre Swift, Bo Scarborough, Ty Johnson, or Jason Huntley. Like you want to have some other Lions running back on your roster in case Kerryon gets hurt. And DeAndre Swift, who knows? I mean, rookie running backs, you never know. But running back, Bob Quinn has said it. Matt Patricia said it. Heck, even Kerryon Johnson said it. Like, it's going to be more than one guy carrying the ball. And I know for fantasy owners, that's frustrating as heck. But that's that's what I think you're going to see in a lot of teams in the league this year, but certainly with the Lions.
Definitely. But I mean, I think what's interesting there is, I think that if you're going to be taking someone like Kerryon Johnson on your roster spot, it makes a lot of sense to shore him up with someone like a DeAndre Swift, but also, you're not drafting him as your RB1. Right. So as long as you're, being sick, like having that safety net around him, he's still someone that's got a high upside, because like you said, they want to run the ball. There is volume available there, but you just don't know, given the situation. Obviously, we hear a lot of great things about DeAndre Swift and all of his capabilities, but we don't know how that's going to shake out. So if you want to shore up that position and have someone like him, or maybe a Bo Scarborough on the back end of your roster, you're just going to be set up well for the season that way. And then, hey, if one of those players break out, both of them break out, that's really great trading potential that you have to get other players on your team and then move those pieces around. But yeah, I mean, for me, I always get excited when I see rookie running backs. I definitely drafted Josh Jacobs as much as I could when he was coming in as a rookie, because I get super excited about these players. But, with the injury history that Kerryon Johnson has, another good reason to shore up that position. So definitely love that.
Yeah, I went very high on David Johnson last year. So take fantasy advice from me with that caveat. I mean, it's Sam, like you said, I mean, I think both these players are very high upside players, but you have to understand that it could end up being very similar to like a New England situation or a Seattle situation from post Marshawn to kind of now, where like it's probably going to be Chris Carson, where like you just didn't know for a couple of years what you were getting. Like,
Yeah.
you could have a CJ Prosise for like 3 weeks, go nuts, and then cool, I've got him, I pick him up. I mean, you know, there was 1 year. Oh yeah, there was a Chiefs situation a few years back. I think it's when Spencer Ware got hurt, and
okay, and Charkandrick West was a thing.
Yeah, and like I went the opposite direction and picked up Niall Davis because they had picked him up and then they cut him and then like he went to Green Bay and I was like, oh great, and he like thought he might play and then didn't, you know. But that's the thing with running backs. Running backs get hurt. It's a high volume position for injuries in the league. So, you know, I mean, again, I was very high on, like I said, on David Johnson last year. That looked like a pretty smart bet.
And then it didn't really
in August, and then now. Like, but I'll tell you right now, and this is going to be on video, and I may regret saying this, but you know what? If David Johnson's sitting there in the middle rounds of your draft this year, take David Johnson because he's really good when he's healthy. And I mean, he can catch passes out of the backfield, and Deshaun Watson's going to have to throw to someone. I think very similar to what we were talking about with Cam Newton at the top, right? If you can get a healthy David Johnson, you're going to get a player of great value.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, with Deshaun Watson, you also have that type of quarterback where he's going to be able to make a play and extend a play and be able to utilize someone like David Johnson who can be used in the passing game and used divisively in different ways. So if you got him healthy, he's dynamic. And you've got him paired with someone who is a brilliant football mind in Deshaun Watson. So he's going to be able to make the best out of that situation. So I have David Johnson, a couple shares in some dynasty leagues that I'm going to hold on to because I also have him at a position where he's more of like my flex, which I think is a good sweet spot to have someone like David Johnson. I'm not relying on him as my one, as my two, but as a flex, I love that. That's a great upside to me.
Yeah. I mean, that I think is where he's of good value. I mean, without a doubt, that's where I think he's of good value. I will not take him as my RB1 this year. I have learned that lesson a few too many times. As
all learned lessons like that.
I just, you know, listen, I'm in some weird leagues. You and I have talked about that. Like, so it changes kind of my value on certain players. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Right now, I'm just hopeful there is a season at this point. Like I have friends in this one big league I'm in, like it's a 16-team league where you start basically the whole league. It was kind of a great, when I covered college, it was a great introduction for me to the NFL because all of a sudden I knew like who the number 4 and 5 receivers were on most of the teams going in, like my first year covering the NFL. But like I'm sure they're doing mock drafts right now. I'm positive of it. Yeah. I'm sure they are. And I'm just like, listen, let's get to training camp first and let's see what that looks like.
Yes.
And then let's go from there. Because that's the other thing too, not to go back to the COVID conversation, Sam, but one thing that I am very curious to see, and I need to talk to our wonderful Stefania Bell over at ESPN about this because I'm curious what she thinks about it. But will there be more soft tissue injuries early on this year that could cost players in week 1 and week 2 because they didn't have the same type of necessarily the same type of training they've had in the past, and we don't know like how much ramp up there's going to be. We don't know any of these other questions when it comes to training camp. And then what happens if a guy gets COVID in the middle of training camp and misses a couple of weeks? Like what do you do there? And so to me, that's where I would, you know, as much as we've talked about COVID for like half of this, we're like an hour long now for half of this podcast. That's all on top. If there's a season, that's all on top of like the normal injury rate in the NFL, which is high. So you're talking about injuries plus COVID, like for fantasy purposes, since this is very much sometimes a fantasy podcast. Like, do you expand your fantasy roster this year?
Yeah. Do you add those extra IR spots?
Have you all, like, I haven't had these conversations with anyone in any of my leagues yet because I just haven't. Although now that we're talking about this, I'm going to actually email and ask. but that's just gonna, in the one crazy deep league, it's just gonna be a longer draft, and I don't have the patience for that. But like in your leagues, like in your dynasty leagues, in some of those other leagues, have you had conversations about what to do with COVID there in that situation? Has that come up yet?
Well, I mean, that's definitely a conversation that is ramping up. I mean, in one league that I have, where it's my crazy league, and we already expanded the league again. Took it to a 2 QB league as well as full IDP. So we already had to add roster spots for that reason. But we also have to make sure that, I mean, we have like a single waiver wire a week situation where you can only pick up players on Wednesdays. Well, we added a Saturday one during our rules meeting before COVID really was like as rampant as it's been. But now it's kind of like, do we abolish that rule and just have waivers open daily? Because we don't know who's going to test positive on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, and then you're going to have to supplement that position. But I think it's a question that needs to be answered just like in the different, platforms that we can all be drafting on, but maybe they add an extra IR spot is an automatic thing, just because you're going to need to be able to hold on to that player and then supplement the position. So that's going to be something that I think that different platforms are going to have to address.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, so I'm in a fantasy golf league that I was, because we got an email this week saying rest in peace fantasy golf league for this year, because which I'm fine with, I'm good with, but the reality of it is, how do you manage that? Like, because and golf's much different. You pick 3 guys every week, and it was a very simplistic league. The guy, just his own work schedule got in the way. But like, will there be fantasy football leagues that go on hiatus this year for multiple reasons, including like, we don't know how to deal with any of this. Like, this is supposed to be fun, and like, how fun will it really be? Because that's the thing. At the end of the day, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, right?
It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be competitive, equal fun too.
But
so as soon as some players,
at the end of the day, like, and I'd say this for watching football too.
Yeah.
If you don't get joy in it, why are you doing it?
Exactly.
And it, like, to me, if all of a sudden, if I were a fantasy football player, and I weren't a serious fantasy football player, if I was just a casual fantasy football player, and all of a sudden, like, half my team got I would just get so frustrated. Like, are you throwing the towel that week? Like, what do you do? Like, I don't know the answers to any of those questions. Like, that's the theme of this podcast, right? Who knows?
Who knows? If I could name this podcast, I don't know, but I have questions. I have questions, but I don't know the answer.
That is my life. Like, that is my life as a reporter. I don't know, but I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of annoying questions until we get to an answer.
I honestly, as someone that won my big crazy league last year, so I have the trophy, I'm kind of okay with canceling the season and just holding on to the trophy for another year. I'm kind of okay with it.
Oh, boy.
Knock on wood, I don't want bad juju. I'm just saying. Like, I think it'd be better if you get into the league, and honestly, like, you're in week 5 and there's different teams that have just been completely smashed by COVID. At what point does your commissioner then go, guys, this isn't fun and it's not going to be fair to have one person win based on playing the 4th string, whatever, week in and week out? What kind of, fun advantage is this? Like, do we just put a stop on this and then we see how it plays out and then try and do like a best ball thing at the end, or try and do something else where you are doing something competitive when it's been worked out? We'll get there when we get there, but
yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a weird year for everything. I know Sheila Ford Hamp, the new owner of the Lions, like, she was asked about Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn's job security. And that one of the first, she said, like, it's tough to even say wins and losses because this is going to be a weird year.
Yes.
Everyone understands that. Players get it, coaches get it, GMs get it, owners get it, media gets it. Everyone understands. Fans, I think, get it. Everyone understands it's going to be a weird year. It's going to be a different year. And I think we just got to all kind of roll with it and take it as it comes, as we've all been doing since the middle of March when the NBA went away.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and then just talk about one fun thing that I know that I'm really wanting to do, and I'm going to put you on the spot for this.
Great. Awesome.
When are you going to have your Marvel episode of your podcast for the Michael Rothstein Show? Okay. If you guys don't follow it, please go ahead and find Mike's show, the Michael Rothstein Show. He has amazing coverage and interviews. You guys have to follow it, but you're going to follow it also because we're going to have a Marvel episode.
We are.
You and I are both on top of this.
Do it soon because the podcast is going to take a semi hiatus here over the next few weeks while I try to take a semi vacation. Usually I go abroad. Will not be doing that.
Usually you travel the world. You're usually all over the place.
I know. Usually I was talking to my brother about that today. Usually I ramp up and I'm on a plane generally around July 4th to somewhere else in the world for a couple of weeks, and I shut off my phone and no one hears from me unless you follow me on Instagram, and it's kind of great. Not going to do that this year because there's nowhere to go. So yeah, we're going to do that. We may even do it this week. I'm going to email the one other guy that so the idea for the podcast. So brief little history there. When quarantine started back in March, I decided I was going to watch every Marvel movie and most of the television series. Season 7, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., really good. It's in the middle of the season right now. Last season of that show. But I basically said, all right, I'm going to do that. It took 2 months to do that. That ended, I finished it like mid-May, and then other things obviously in the world have happened, and it didn't feel right timing-wise to do a Marvel like movie podcast episode. And so we just kind of delayed it, but I will send a note to the guy actually tomorrow and see if we can record it this week and then maybe have it roll next week, because this is also kind of a dead time for anything really for a couple of weeks until training camp gets going, and then we got football potentially, maybe, possibly, who knows?
Maybe, hopefully.
Talking about again.
But yeah, no, I know that you were going through the Marvel series as well, and I did it probably about the same time. I did the Russo brothers They posted, I think, on Reddit the order in which you should watch the movies, and so I did it that way.
Yeah, I forget where I got my list. I did it also the same way. Like I started at the Captain America, the first oldest
Avenger.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you.
First Avenger, and then it goes Captain Marvel.
Right. Then I did not do that. I went Captain Marvel toward the end because there were apparently two schools of thought on that. Mm-hmm. You either watched it right after because it was in 95, but then you wouldn't know who Nick Fury or Philip Coulson were. So if you saved it and watched it right before Infinity War, you at least knew who those people were, and it didn't really mess up the timeline that much because the beginning, not to spoiler alert too much, I mean, these movies have been out for years, but like the beginning and end very much fit more in that timeline. So what I did was I watched First Avenger, then I watched the 2 seasons of Agent Carter on ABC. By the way, a very underrated show. Haley Atwell, fantastic. She was obviously in the First Avenger as well, but she was fantastic in Agent Carter. And I really enjoyed that series. I wish there were more than 2 seasons. And then from there, I went kind of more in that order and then finished with obviously now season 7 of Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, that's the one I have to rewatch again. But it was fun just to watch all of them in that order. So I can't wait to hopefully have a podcast about it. Talk about all of our theories and all that fun stuff, questions I'm sure that we all have.
Sure.
But yeah, and totally nerd out because,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I need to do it soon because otherwise I'm going to forget what I watched.
I know. I'm going to just start rewatching it all again.
We have to do it again. And honestly, like they're great, but I don't got I don't have the patience or the time to, I think, do that a second time. Yeah, I know. So the other reason for the delay was I was holding out hope that I was going to be able to get a couple of special guests to do it with me, you, and this guy I promised on Twitter, which sure. But that it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So I think the 3 of us are just going to have to roll with it. And I'll send you a note about that tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks again for joining. And guys, if you guys don't follow Mike, please do. He's at Mike Rothstein on both IG and Twitter, and he's a fantastic source and writes amazing articles that you guys just need to. If you're not following him, you have to follow him. Fantastic writer.
Stop.
I know. I won't stop. that's why we're besties. But have a wonderful rest of your week. And guys, please, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe and give us a follow. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Samantha R. Holt. Have a wonderful week going ahead and going forward. We'll talk to you guys soon.